This is History Myths and Myth-Conceptions. And today's myth-conception is Immortal Gods. You can hear lots of wild things like, well, ancient Greek gods are not really gods because they haven't created the universe. Or they are not gods because there are dozens and hundreds of them. Real God is one and only, the God. Or Greek gods, or Roman gods, or Hindu gods, or whatever, are not omnipotent. Therefore, they are not gods. So basically, people arrive with preconceived notions originating in their culture or religion and transpose these notions to other cultures and religions without giving it too much thought, which naturally brings us to a general misunderstanding of the subject. One of the major problems here is actually terminology. There can be different definitions of a god or a deity, and different religions come up with different understanding of these words. And even the followers of the religion, which has a more or less fleshed out definition of a god, sometimes have their own interpretations of the concept and unique ideas about the core tenets of their denomination. For example, how many times have you heard from people who identify as Christians that they believe that there is something bigger than us? Well, an elephant is bigger than you, so what? Do these people know that technically definitions such as this are heresy? Now, the majority of the people in the world either follow one of the Abrahamic religions, or they are greatly influenced by them, their concepts, and vocabulary, which naturally leads to misunderstanding when they encounter other religions, especially when these religions operate with similar terminology. I've heard stories that some of the professors who teach students about culture and history of ancient Greece and ancient Rome deliberately choose not to use the word God when discussing Greek mythology. They try to use the Greek word theos instead. Just to avoid confusion. Well, unless you have Greek students who naturally will be puzzled by this choice of words. We have an interesting situation when, for example, Christians actually use words like theos, a Greek word, or deus, a Latin word. It's all over their religious texts. They inherited this terminology from antiquity. But they twist their meanings to their taste, so that these words conform with their understanding of the divine. Most of the time, just reserving them for their principal deity, the chief god. But Greeks and Romans mostly used these words differently. They used them to indicate powerful immortal beings. Yes, there could be different opinions as well, and when you're reading the works of Stoics like Epictetus, you can clearly see that their idea of the god is kind of different from the traditional understanding. And there are reasons for that. But when we're discussing Greek or Roman mythology, it is important to understand that the followers of these religions were not Christians or Muslims. And their gods never really had an obligation to create the universe, mankind, be generally more or less omnipotent and all-knowing. No, not really. Usually just the fact of being immortal made you like 90% eligible to be considered a god. That's not the only factor, but probably the most prominent one. So when we are reading about ancient Greek gods, we must keep in mind that first and foremost they are deathless, which means they cannot die. Sorry for being redundant. I mention this because people sometimes think that being immortal means that you cannot die of old age. But Greek and Roman gods cannot die, period. They can't be killed. When you read Greek myths and notice that something horrible happens to a god and he or she leaves the stage permanently, that doesn't mean that this deity ceased to exist. It exists in some other form, probably incapacitated form, because you actually can incapacitate a god, but you cannot kill a god. Let's go through a couple of Greek myths to see how this idea works. The goddess Athena, as you know, emerged from the head of Zeus grown up and in full armor. And she kind of doesn't have a mother, except for she actually does have a mother, Metis, the goddess of wisdom. I mean, her name literally means wisdom. She is wisdom personified. So Zeus conceived a child with Metis, but there was a prophecy that a child from this union would eventually dethrone Zeus. Basically, we were supposed to have a new cycle of children dethroning their parents. So in order to prevent all this from happening, Zeus just devoured Metis, as you do. Obviously, the main idea here was that you don't have to concentrate on the literal meaning of this process. You should concentrate on the symbolism. Zeus had no wisdom to speak of. Now he swallowed wisdom personified, and now wisdom is within him. But if you choose to perceive this story literally, well, Zeus has a living and theoretically breathing wisdom somewhere inside him. Metis, who is immortal and cannot die even after devourment. You can even try and set her free, you just need to cut Zeus wide open, the way he opened Kronos and liberated his siblings. Then there is an interesting story of Dionysus. I mean, there's more than one, but let's stick to the most popular version. Zeus impregnated Semele, daughter of Cadmus, the founder of Thebes. Semele was human, which means her offspring was supposed to be a demigod, a hero, but not a full-blown god. But that's where we have an unusual twist. Hera, the wife of Zeus, found out about the affair and unleashed her wrath upon Semele in an interesting way. She disguised herself as an old woman and gave the poor girl a wonderful advice. Semele doesn't know for sure if the person she's sleeping with is a god. Gods actually disguise themselves when they interact with humans, but if a god reveals his true form, that's the proof. So Semele had to ask Zeus to grant her a wish, any wish. But Zeus must also swear by the waters of river Styx. That's the only way to be sure that a god will actually honor the oath. Zeus made a promise and then was terrified when he learned that the actual wish of Semele is to see the god's true form. And this is where we can learn something about the physiology of gods, because indeed gods can take any form, not necessarily a human form, but their true form is so majestic that the true glory of a god is gonna incinerate any mortal instantly. They also don't have blood, they have ichor. And they are not really big fans of normal human food, they prefer ambrosia and nectar. But I digress. So obviously Semele was incinerated when Zeus was forced to present his true form. And that's exactly what Hera had in mind when she was manipulating the girl. Zeus couldn't do anything about Semele herself, he couldn't save her, but he could save the embryo of his son. He caught the embryo and sewed it up inside his thigh, and later gave birth to a child. That's how Dionysus became a full-blown god. In some of the Orphic versions, Dionysus was essentially cut into pieces, but you could relatively easily put this Humpty Dumpty together again, because Greek gods are immortal. That's their main feature.